Good morning. Welcome to the brief. I'm Bear with BearIndependent.com. As you know, founder and CEO of RefugeMedical.com, president of Caleb House, president of Grindstone Ministries, refuge training, all the other things we do here. And before we get started with the brief this morning for 19APR23, I was reminded yet again this morning before I came out here into the team room to sit down and prepare this brief for y'all, just what a damn good audience y'all are. And so I wanted to say before we got started how much I appreciate you. We on this side of the camera don't get to do all the cool things that we do without you and your involvement and your support. Whether that's Refuge Medical, Refuge Training, Bear Independent, Prosperity, Patreon, Grindstone, or Caleb House, we're dead in the water without you. So, thank you. Legitimately, thank you. Now, on to the brief. Bear Independent Brief, 19 April 23. We're going to be looking at some updates on Ukraine and Russia and the UK and North Korea / South Korea. And also we're going to continue our weekly initiatives, week 2, talking about water this week from a preparedness standpoint. EU officials are criticizing Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia for recent import bans they placed on Ukrainian produce. These countries had their markets flooded by the excess surplus from Ukraine since the EU created air quote solidarity lanes in which inspections were dropped for imports. That swell of cheap produce flooding neighboring countries placed their farmers, the farmers of Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, at risk of being financially forced out of their livelihoods, a risky proposition for a country's agriculture. Poland's European Union ambassador, Andrzej Sabdos, commented, quote, "Solidarity lanes aren't working. We have no effective tools controlling the transit. We have in our silos some 4 million tons of Ukrainian grain, and we need some time to stabilize the situation." End quote. What situation? Quote, "Individual farmers started to block terminals and train connections. They were protesting. We were very close to an escalation." End quote. So remember all that grain that was locked up in Ukraine and the Russia Black Sea grain deal, and the idea that this Ukrainian grain was going to be moved through Europe and then distributed out from there to the countries that need it the most, the starving kids in Africa, literally. That's not entirely happening. Why? Well, as it turns out, politicians and political systems everywhere are corrupt. And they lie everywhere. And they do what's in their best interest everywhere. And so a lot of that grain is not ending up at the final destinations that the Russian Black Sea grain deal was predicated on, to the tune of 4 million tons of grain in Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. Also, I have the door to the team room open because it's overcast today and it's dark in here. So if you hear chickens, turkeys, dogs, cows, sheep, goats, guinea hens, geese, or anything else, welcome to the homestead. Now, I have to admit, there's a part of me that would not be terribly upset if I had 4 million tons of grain. Bear, what do we do when, the system collapses and there's nothing to eat? Don't worry, homies. We have 4 million tons of grain. Nice. What are we going to do with that? Put it in a pyramid or something. I don't know. Go read Genesis. EU diplomats called the bans on importing more grain counterproductive, and they believe they may also have been illegal according to both international and EU law. The Czech Minister of Agriculture, Zdeněk Nekula, said, quote, "We must find agreement throughout the EU on the rules under which agricultural commodities will transit from Ukraine to European ports, and that production from them goes further to countries outside the EU that are dependent on Ukrainian production." Yes, Zdeněk Nekula. That was the original idea with Ukrainian exports under the Russian Black Sea grain deal. That was the idea, but that's not what's happening. The EU is a financial organization, financial agreement. It's kind of been rife with problems from jump. Have they had their wins? Oh, sure, yeah. But you have a bunch of disaggregated power and influence in Europe. All these different literal kingdoms and fiefdoms that are all trying to be under the banner of cooperation under the European Union. And in many cases, it just doesn't work. Does anybody remember Brexit? Which the UK has not really put into full effect anyway. But it doesn't... It could work, but it's very difficult to make something like that work, where you have dozens of different sovereign entities, all with their own rules and laws and populations and customs and traditions, trying to fall underneath this one overarching set of rules and customs and traditions about how we as a unit, we as Europe, are going to do things. It's a challenge. More laws, in my mind, generally not the answer. When you are governing a very large populace, say 340 million-ish people in the United States of America, I think that federally, at the top level, you should have the fewest number of laws required in order to maintain some semblance of normalcy. And then, per our Constitution, which very few people think is actually a thing anymore, or it's a living document, it's open to interpretation. Yes, there is an amendment process for that. If you would like to amend it, you're welcome to do that. Best of luck getting 2/3 votes on we need to give human rights to people who shit in litter boxes. It's not going to happen, which is why you see people issuing edict and credos and executive, what do they call those? Executive orders and so forth and so on. Or unelected bureaucrats making de facto law, like through the ATF or whatever, rather than using the constitutional amendment process. But we have, in America, we have the 10th Amendment states' rights, where if it's not explicitly stated that it's a federal responsibility, it becomes a state issue. Had that system been followed the way that our founders intended, I think that's a really good system. If it's not under the federal purview, it then falls to the states, right? Well, the EU is having issues with that because, for all intents and purposes, they've tried to create a federal level of statutes and laws and agreements that doesn't necessarily track with all of the state level, the nation-state level constituents of the EU, their traditions and laws and customs and agreements that they've made. So, best of luck, Europe. This issue of Ukrainian grain is time sensitive, as the ripening heat of summer will soon dawn on the grain fields of the breadbasket of the world. Not only are Romania and Bulgaria considering similar bans, but Poland and Slovakia will both have national elections later in the year, so this could impact not only the dispersion of global grain and corresponding prices, but also national politics. Some even postulate that this issue of failing distribution may be fissuring Eastern EU support from Ukraine in general. Now, I find it quite poetic that going into what I consider will be the lean times within the next year, that everybody wants to bitch and moan now about too much grain. Now, I get it. From an agricultural standpoint, if you're a farmer in one of these countries and the price that you need to get, because the cost of labor, the cost of inputs, the cost of insurance, if you can even get it anymore, have all gone sky high through the roof. So therefore, the retail price of your product has to go up, right? I understand. It's basic economics. Then you couple that with supply and demand. Well, the demand is high, but the supply went through the roof. So now your pricing is way higher than the pricing on this Ukrainian grain. That makes it very difficult for you to sell your product, which means you don't get any money. And there's another harvest coming. So that sucks for you as the farmer. I get it. But within a year, I imagine people are going to be crying in the other direction. There is no food, or there's very little food, or what do we do now? We've got nothing to eat. And if you've been paying attention at all to European politics lately, there's been a lot of civil resistance / borderline revolution, revolting by farmers in Europe. That's probably an indicator. I wouldn't be surprised if within a year or two we see the same type of thing here in the United States of America. As for Poland, Kiev and Warsaw, the capital of Poland, capital of Ukraine, were just able to make a deal to enable Ukrainian grain to move through the country. But there's something else brewing. Next week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will be meeting in New York to discuss the Black Sea grain export deal. Excuse me, I need more caffeine this morning. In only a few weeks, the deal could expire should Russian demands go unmet. Russia has warned that the outlook for the continuation of the deal was, quote, not so great, end quote. Sheep. Can you hear the sheep in the background? We have one mama who's about to give birth. She's a noob, so she's being incredibly vocal. And of course, it's supposed to piss rain here tomorrow, so tomorrow will probably be the day that she chooses to give birth, because sheep are very inconsiderate when they birth their children. They basically pick the worst possible weather in the forecast in any given 2-week period, and that's when they decide to poop out a baby. Now, there's a couple other things I want to look at from RT. But before we do that, let's continue our conversation about water this week. We talked on Monday about 3 gallons per day and having ways to purify and boil water. One of the things that I think most of y'all could probably benefit from, and they're relatively cheap. I haven't bought one in a hot minute, but the last time I did, I think they were $20. So now with Biden inflation, let's say maybe they're $30, I don't know. But the water bob, if you have tubs in your house, like a bathtub, get the water bob. What is it? It's basically, I think it's 100 liter, or maybe it's 100 gallon water bladder that you put in your tub. You hook up to the faucet, and if something goes bad, like, oh no, something terrible could be happening, go to the tub, put the water bob in the tub, and it has a fill spigot. Put that over the tub spout and fill it up with 100 gallons of water. Then you tie off that gooseneck that you just filled up with, and it has a hand pump in it. And you have 100 gallons of clean-ish water, unless you live in Flint, Michigan, or Ohio, or elsewhere. You have 100 gallons of water in this water bladder in your tub before the power goes out, before you lose water pressure, before all of those other things. And one of the things that a lot of people, I don't think, truly understand is when you have a grid down scenario, whether that's a high altitude EMP or a solar flare or a hurricane or a tornado, or it could be all these freaking Jedburgh teams that we see working all over the United States of America and elsewhere, blowing up civilian infrastructure, whether that's dairy farms or railroad tracks or power transmission and generation or substations or Azure standard warehouses and factories, or all of the myriad other infrastructure sites that have been explicitly targeted over the last couple of years by bad actors. If the grid goes down for any reason, it's just a matter of time before a handful of things that are relatively important to sustaining life stop. So immediately, if a grid goes down, localized, regional, or national, commo suffers almost immediately. And yes, a lot of people have radios, but a lot of people that have radios do not train with them, don't have a commo plan in place. They don't, like, I have a radio, but I don't know what to do with it. Well, that's the same as having a rifle that's not zeroed that you don't train with. Possession does not equate to proficiency, right? So, commo goes down. When commo goes down, logistics goes down. If there's no electricity, getting gasoline and diesel out of the tanks at the gasoline pumps and the diesel pumps is nigh on impossible. In some cases, backup generation will be brought in to power the fuel stations to get fuel up out of the ground if you live in a place that has a fairly well-versed emergency management plan. I wouldn't bet on that because Grindstone has deployed 37 times in the last four-ish years. And I've only seen that a handful of times. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've seen that. But it can be done. You can hook up backup generation to the gas station and use that power from the generator to get the gasoline out of the ground. But I digress. So commo, logistics, transpo all suffer immediately. Healthcare goes to shit immediately because hospitals do have backup generation and cell towers do have backup generation as long as the fuel lasts. It oftentimes doesn't last in a prolonged environment. So healthcare goes to shit. Water treatment plants and city water or rural water, if you are connected to pipes, infrastructure that is owned by the county, the city, the township, whatever. Typically the way that works is that there is a large water tower. Imagine this is a very large water tower. And there's a pump at the bottom of it that pumps water up and dumps it into the top of the tower. And then that tower builds hydraulic pressure. And then all the weight of that water in the tower pushes the water out of the pipes to your house. Well, if the pump at the bottom, which runs on electricity, doesn't have electricity, it can't pump water from whatever the water source is up into the top of the tower to create that hydraulic pressure to give you water pressure. So what that means is without backup generation, it's a ticking time bomb for this tower to run out of water. And the lower the tower gets, the lower the water pressure gets. That can be 12 to 72 hours, depending on where you live and what kind of water infrastructure you have and do they have backup generation, before you run out of water. Same thing with sewer. If you're on septic, you should be fine. If you do human manure and composting toilets, you'll be fine. But if you're on city sewer, it's just a matter of time before the wastewater treatment plants and all those transfer pumps stop working, and there's no place for it to go either. All that to say, if you are in a situation, whether it's a natural disaster or an attack or whatever it might be, or just an accident where you have a grid down scenario, fill your water bob in your tub. That gives you, for every tub you have, that gives you 100 gallons. You can also, and you should, in all of your packs, like your bug out bags, your inch bags, inches, I'm never coming home bag, whatever, your get home bags, whatever, make sure your water containers in your packs are full of water. Something you can do is keep with your packs a gallon of water or a couple of Nalgene bottles or just a case of water or whatever, that before you move, you pound water, right? So this is water that's in addition to your packs. So you're starting out hydrated so that you can, you have more capacity of water in that bag. You don't have to immediately start drinking the water in your bag. You pound water before you move, and then you throw your rucksack on or whatever. I get the question a lot about, should I, do I need an inch bag and a bug out bag and a get home bag, and what's the difference? For me, it's all the same capability. It's just a matter of context. So I don't nerd out over my bug out bag versus my inch bag versus get home bag versus operational rucksack versus whatever. Like, they're all the same thing. I need all the same capabilities in all of those. It's just a matter of the context in which I employ that bag, right? I need 5 C's of survival, cutting tool, combustion, cordage, container, cover. I need that in every bag for sure. And then you can go deeper into the 10 C's, the 12 C's, compass, casualty care, communication, combat, calories. Yeah, I want that in all my bags as well. So fill the bottles. Whatever your water containers are, your Camelback bladders, your Nalgene bottles, your Smart Water bottles, your whatever, your canteens, in your packs, and make sure they stay full. And then in your house as well, if you have water containers, 1 gallon jugs that have been properly rinsed and disinfected, or whatever it might be, fill all of those things, keep them full. And if an event is on the horizon or has just happened, before you lose water pressure, fill all of those things. Now, again, if you live rurally, you may have a well, and that well is typically powered by grid power if you're on the grid. So also understand that it's just a matter of time before, if the power went out and you don't have backup generation for that well, if you don't have a 240 volt, 30 to 50 amp generator to power the well pump, you're not getting water out of that well anymore. There's a number of different things, whether they're super high quality, powerful hand pumps, if you have a relatively shallow well, all the way down to these things that look like long cylindrical bullets. I forget exactly what they're called, with a rope attached to the end that you can remove the well head, drop down the well, pull back up with the rope, and get a gallon or 2 out at a time. So you want to be thinking about that, because water is incredibly important, and that's what we're talking about this week. So there's a little bit about water preparedness. This is week 2 of our 50-week initiative, because I think we got about 50 weeks before things get super weird again. Not that they're not weird now, but I mean like weird to the point of some people are going to be running around like their hair's lit on fire. What do we do? All right. From RT, Russian propaganda. No magic wand for Ukraine, says UK. It is unlikely that the conflict with Russia will end this year, the British Defense Secretary has said. Unlikely. So this is managing expectations, because I firmly believe that the big they, the global cabal, has decided that we're going to have a war in Ukraine. And that war could end like that if they decided it needed to end. Negotiate a peace deal, boom, handled. But it's not in their best interest to end this war in Ukraine. So, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine will likely continue into next year, UK Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said on Tuesday. Quote, I'm optimistic that between this year and next year, I think Ukraine will continue to have the momentum with it. That's bad English, bro, and you're English. I think Ukraine will continue to have the momentum with it and a position of strength, end quote, Wallace told reporters during a trip to Washington, D.C., as quoted by the New York Times. Wallace warned, however, that, quote, there is not going to be a single magic wand moment when Russia collapses, end quote. The UK has been one of Kiev's main backers, supplying the country with heavy weapons, including Challenger 2 tanks. Only a handful, though. Britain has trained 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers, according to the Defense Ministry, and has pledged to train 20,000 more this year. Also, you didn't hear it from me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I never told you this, but I know for a fact from first-hand intel that has been provided to me by people who are actually doing the things, that in Germany and in Poland, American armed forces are training Ukrainians on M1, A1 and A2 Abrams tanks, and 155 howitzers, and a whole bunch of other interesting things, and unsubstantiated rumored American fighter jets as well. Yep, in Germany and in Poland, that is currently happening. Also, the United States seems to be stockpiling a lot of rolling stock, a lot of hardware in Poland. There's the potential, and I'm not saying it'll happen, but there's the potential that if the United States gets directly involved in Ukraine, that one of our main jumping off points will be Poland. Super duper interesting. Back to the article and then some more commentary. For the past several months, Kiev has been outspoken about its planned counteroffensive, but has not publicly revealed the timetable. By the way, did you see that, 21-year-old, was he Air Force? Pentagon worker who was allegedly responsible for these Pentagon paper leaks. FBI showed up with like 20 guys in full kit to arrest this dude while he was out in his running shorts. Something deeper is going on there, because a 21-year-old with the low-level clearance having access to all those documents is probably unlikely. More like somebody else passed the documents to him, and he was the one who was posting them. He's the patsy. He's the fall guy. He's the cover-up. And even then, I think so much of that is bread and circuses. It's just a song and a dance. Let's arrest this kid, right? Because he's, we can have this kid take the heat. We'll quietly deal with him behind the iron curtain of the United States judicial system. And whoever was actually responsible for that, who knows what happens to them. Ukrainian officials have said, however, that the schedule and success of the endeavor will heavily depend on the supply of Western tanks and other equipment. Alexei Danilov, the secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, told the Associated Press on Monday that the push will start at an appropriate time when the country is ready. There was also an interesting report that came out. Was it the Times or was it the Post? Found something like 95% of the direct funds that were provided to Ukraine, because a lot of the American taxpayer support of money that's been provided to Ukraine has been provided to defense contractors to basically replace the stock that has been sent to Ukraine. But there has also been money poured directly into Ukraine to prop up their economy and allow their government to continue to function. Something like 95% of that money that's gone directly to Ukraine has not been allocated appropriately. Like, here's $1 million for whatever, for food, right? Go buy food, Ukraine. $950,000 of that million was graft, went to politicians and all the other scumbags, and $50,000 of it got used for the actual intended purpose. 95%. As if we should be surprised by that, because Ukraine has been a corrupt oligarchy for, since the Soviet Union fell. And then it was a corrupt Soviet oligarchy before that. So super duper surprised at that. Prime Minister Dennis Schmigel, my precious, recently stated that the offensive will start, quote, in the nearest future. Schmigel stated that the recent leaking of Pentagon files, which included reports about how Western countries were training and equipping Ukrainian troops, will not change the plans for the counteroffensive. However, a source close to President Vladimir Zelensky told CNN that Kiev had altered some of its plans because of the leak. Well, geez, I would hope so. Some Western leaders, including NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, warned that the conflict, which broke out in February 22, could last for years. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said, Washington is determined to support Kiev for as long as it takes. The Kremlin said this month that the Russian military has been meticulously monitoring information regarding Ukraine's plans. Moscow has also repeatedly stated that countries which send weapons to Kiev could become de facto parties to the conflict. Yeah, that's war aid. Including us, the Americans. Now, just a just an observation, and I know so many of you are phenomenal 4-star armchair generals and know everything that's happening on Ukraine, and there's a wide variety of opinion and air quote fact as to what's happening in Ukraine. Although I have people who are boots on the ground there in Ukraine, so I get at least a handful of individual perspectives daily as to what's happening there. So you do you, boo, whatever you're into. I find it interesting that the second, if not third best military in the world, Russia, we're, 16 months into this conflict, fighting the Ukrainians, and this war could take years to perpetrate. Now, never underestimate your enemy. That's a really good way to get ambushed. The Russian performance in Ukraine still doesn't impress me. And there's a lot of people who will say, well, thus far, Russia's performance in Ukraine has followed the historical pattern of every other war that Russia has ever perpetrated, where basically they're a shit show in their first year on the ground, but then after that, in years 2, 3, 4, and 5, they get their act together and they go in there and they wreck house, and ultimately they win. Maybe. But again, admitting my biases as somebody who is indoctrinated into, M81 Woodland and G.I. Joe and Rambo and Be All You Can Be in the Army and Full Metal Jacket and all of that growing up, the big threat was the Soviets, right? The Russians. I'm not overly impressed with the Russian performance in Ukraine militarily. I'm not saying I want the Russians to land 3 towns away and then me and all my homeboys got to go fight them. I'm not really interested in that either. And I will also readily admit the readiness posture of the United States military ain't what it was. But I still trend in the direction of an open armed conflict between the United States of America and Russia. I think we get them. I think we beat them. Would it be a bloodbath? Probably. Am I eager for war? No. But I think back against the wall, fight Russia or die, we fight Russia and we win. Now, that's all predicated on good leadership, which we don't have right now, and that would have to change. So you could argue that till the cows come home. But just big, ugly brass facts. Oh, brass facts. What's up, brass facts? I think the United States of America could take Russia based upon their performance in Ukraine. Because we're 16 months in and they're still struggling to hold what they've already taken in Ukraine, and a bunch of farmers with AKs are holding them back. Come on now. Come on now. Let's see. Also, last article of the day, also from RT. This one's interesting. Russia could arm North Korea. Russia could arm North Korea if South Korea sends weapons to Ukraine, according to Medvedev. The former president responded to Seoul's suggestion that it could send lethal aid to Kiev. Seoul being capital of South Korea, Kiev being the capital of Ukraine. I really am not a fan of this style of reporting where we refer to countries based upon their capitals. But it is what it is. Moscow could offer advanced weapons to North Korea if South Korea begins to supply military aid to Ukraine, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has suggested. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol indicated a possible policy shift regarding the Ukraine conflict in an interview with Reuters on Wednesday ahead of a state visit to the U.S. next week. Quote, "If there is a situation the international community cannot condone, such as any large-scale attack on civilians, massacre, or serious violation of the laws of war, it might be difficult for us to insist only on humanitarian or financial support," Yoon said. In other words, if Russia does something really messed up, we're going to quit sending MREs and we're going to start sending artillery shells, as we'll see. Quote, considering our relationship with the parties engaged in the war and developments in the battlefield, we will take the most appropriate measures, he added, president of South Korea. Medvedev, who currently serves as deputy chair of the Russian National Security Council, noted that Seoul had thus far refused to supply lethal aid to Kiev. Quote, I wonder what the residents of this nation, South Korea, would say when they see the newest example of Russian weapons in possession of their closest neighbors, our partners from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea. Medvedev wrote on social media. In other words, oh, that's cute. South Korea wants to send weapons to Ukraine. Watch what happens when we, Russians, send weapons to North Korea and put them right on your border. Chess. Yoon told Reuters that he plans to discuss with U.S. President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. * how the two nations can achieve, quote, tangible outcomes in deterring North Korea. He added that Seoul is developing, quote, extra high-performance, high-power weapons, end quote, to fend off perceived threats from its neighbor, North Korea. Last week, Pyongyang, capital of North Korea, reported testing its first solid-propellant intercontinental ballistic missile. South Korea, which is a major arms producer, has refrained from sending lethal aid to Ukraine, citing its policy against supplying weapons to war zones. President Yoon's office said his remarks to Reuters did not signal a policy change by the government, according to Yonhap news agency. South Korea media claimed last week that the country has considered loaning the U.S. some 500,000 rounds for 155mm artillery guns. Now, South Korea and North Korea and the line of conflict there is basically filled with artillery. That we're talking like 1950s, 1960s, maybe 1970s technology artillery. And it has been long been considered that if something was to break out between North and South Korea, that it would be a barrage of artillery on both sides. And part of the concern there is that the capital of South Korea, Seoul, is within artillery distance of that line. So it's been expected for decades that should North Korea get froggy, that they will begin an attack with an artillery barrage. And so there's lots of artillery on both sides of that line. And so South Korea is considering loaning, that's an interesting phrase, some 500,000 rounds of 155mm to the United States. Here's where it gets interesting. Ukraine is reportedly in desperate need of this type of munition for the conflict with Russia. A government official described the arrangement to the Dong Al-Ibo newspaper as, quote, indirect aid to Ukraine, end quote, which would supposedly show that Seoul was a responsible member of the international community without provoking Russia. So, South Korea would give you the United States 500,000 artillery rounds, and then the United States would turn around and give those to Ukraine to continue this war in Ukraine against Russia. And then South Korea can say, hey, we just gave them to the United States. What happened after that? That's not on us, homie. But Russia's saying, if you give those 500,000 artillery rounds to the United States, we all know they're going to end up in Ukraine. That now makes you a party to this war in Ukraine. If you do that, we're going to put advanced weapons into North Korea to threaten you with, South Korea. So maybe check yourself before you wreck yourself. Interesting geopolitical developments here. That is the brief for today. If you're one of those people that jumps off when it's time to talk about how to support the show, this is your polite invitation to beat feet, skedaddle, get out of here. Have a blessed day. Shalom. For everybody else, for all of y'all who are proud members of the best audience on the face of the earth, let's talk about how to support the show. There are links to all of this stuff in the description down below. And I will be quick this morning. On Patreon, we talked about this morning mutual assistance groups networking. And actually, I shot that video from the standpoint of somebody asking, how do I start a nonprofit? Do I really need a board for a nonprofit? Or can I just do it all myself? So I answered that question on Patreon this morning, both from the standpoint of a nonprofit and also a mutual assistance group, because they're groups of people aimed towards a common goal that have to perform certain tasks in order to accomplish the mission, support the strategic initiatives that accomplish the mission. Go watch that video. It's on Patreon. Patreon's $5 per month. It's the best $5 you can spend on the internet. Our Patreon channel is a preparedness consultancy. You ask questions, I give you answers to a minimum of 20 times per month. Link in the description. Refuge Medical. Bare facts are in stock, shipping fast. The shipping department was touch and go last week because of the high holy days, the appointed times, but everybody's back to work. We're shipping out stuff super fast. And when we say we have it in stock, what I mean by that is it's under our roof. We own it, and I can send it to you right now. So bare facts are in stock. Potassium iodide for anti-warheads on foreheads medication is in stock. Bleeding prevention kits are in stock. I talked to you on Monday about the ARC, the Advanced Ripaway Kit. This guy right here, still in stock. The SOB right here, the small of the back kit. This has got a soft T tourniquet on it. And then it's also got, you tear this open, pull the red handle, pull this out. And then inside of here, you got all your stuff. Chest seals and combat gauze and compressed gauze and pressure bandage right here, nasal pharyngeal, airway, Sharpie, gloves, all the things you need to work the March algorithm, massive bleeding, airway, respiratory, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, everything else. And of course, like all of our stuff, proudly made in the United States of America by Americans who get paid a living wage. We have saved 72 lives to date that we're aware of with Refuge Medical equipment. And we have kits that will support whatever your task is, from literally going into combat. We have a lot of our kits in circulation in the Special Forces community and JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. That's Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Army Rangers, Marine, MARSOC, etc., Air Force PJs, etc., etc. So whether you're doing combat, that's your job, or you're driving a minivan, or you have a welding shop or a construction company, or you're a teacher in a school, or you live on a homestead, or you're into Baja racing or four-wheel drive off-roading or whatever, we have, I believe it's 19 different kits that are all specifically designed for whatever that task, whatever that application might be. I did want to show you this morning, this being the small of the back kit, it's designed to go on a war belt. Our buddy the Patriot Plumber reached out to us and he was like, hey, I'm doing competition shooting and all of these little kits, the little kits that go on a war belt, they all suck. Can you please make one that doesn't suck? And that's where the SOB, the small of the back, came from. And like I said, we have a lot of cool guys now who run these on their war belts. But I wanted to show you something because a picture says 1,000 words. Stand by. This is one of my plate carriers. And you'll see right here on the cummerbund, I have an SOB kit mounted downward because I can do that, pull it out, an SOB kit. Blow a kit in my hand, cat tourniquet here, good to go. And I like this because A, it gives me a place to rest my elbow when I'm patrolling, right? So that's nice when you're holding the rifle all day, every day. But it also has the functionality, I can get to this with either hand, which is important. And if you mount it upside down on your plate carrier, then you can just push and rip it out, good to go. I also believe the cool kids at Refuge Medical are featuring EDC kits this week. So the Slick kit, which is Sexy Legs and Khaki kit, that's a vacuum sealed kit that you can literally slip into a back pocket or into your briefcase or your glove box or your backpack or whatever. And then the pocket. What's the pocket? Ta-da! This is an SOB pouch, inner pouch, that's got all the stuff that's in an SOB, made in America, in an inner pouch, just like that. And so you can slap that into the pocket of your camis, like so. And now you got a blowout kit on your person that at first glance doesn't look anything like a blowout kit. You just got some junk in your pocket. Nope, I have a purpose-built blowout kit in my pocket. And that's cool if you do that, especially if you're operationally operating like an operator, because it moves stuff off of your belt line, but you still have it on your person. It's still on your line 1, but it's not on your belt line, right? So that saves you some real estate. And for your SHTF group, you could develop an SOP where, hey, everybody has their blowout kit in their left cami pocket or whatever it might be, right? So boom, there it is. And then when you're doing your PCCs, PCIs, got your blowout kit? Yep, got it. Let me see it. Yep, there it is. Okay, cool. Good to go. So that's refugemedical.com. Of course, your promo code is Bear Nation for free shipping on everything in the store. And as you know these days, that's not nothing. There's a significant cost associated with shipping, and it's only going up. So if you'd like to not pay shipping, if you want free shipping, use promo code Bear Nation. Refuge Training, Boise, Idaho. 2 sets of classes going on in Boise, Idaho. One of those classes has sold out. One still has a couple of seats left in Boise. So if you'd like to come to class and learn tactical medicine with an in-person set of instructors, military background, law enforcement background, paramedic background, EMS background, role players, etc., and learn tactical medicine, trauma medicine, the March algorithm, massive bleeding, airway, respiratory, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, everything else. And not in a death by PowerPoint scenario where you have to do reps and sets. You have to apply tourniquets to yourself and other people on the arms and on the legs, and you have to wound pack, and you have to apply chest seals, and you have to kinesthetically do it in our class. And that's the entry level responder 1. And then responder 2, which is CPR and AED and introduction to tactical settings and introduction to scenario-based training, where you will work an MVA, a motor vehicle accident. Like you will work it with your kit, and you get a trainer kit, which is included for free with the cost of our class. So you don't have to destroy your IFAC when you come to class. I hate that about everybody else's tactical medicine class. Bring your kit. Okay, well, I used my kit for training and I leave and something bad happens. My kit is all used up. That's bullshit. So we give you a full-blown trainer kit when you come to class. Tourniquet, pressure bandages, wound packing gauze, chest seals, nasal pharyngeal airway, mylar blanket, etc. It's all part of the trainer kit that you keep. And then that also allows you to enact force multiplication when you leave. So there's a big emphasis on train the trainer with our classes. When you leave our class, you can go back and train your church, your business, your mutual assistance group, your friends, your family, your whatever you're into, right? And then responder 3 is basically a 10-hour Spartan race coupled with force on force, coupled with tactical medicine, coupled with individual and group scenario-based training. You should check that out. It is a thing. Responder 3 is a thing, and it's phenomenal. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know if I can do it, we've had grandmas and grandpas complete the class. It's done, that class is instructed on an individual level. So everybody has to put out, but the 67-year-old grandma, while she's still putting out, is not putting out to the same level as the 22-year-old firefighter who just showed up to class, right? But everybody's going to get some. That's refugetraining.com, or you can click the training tab at refugemedical.com. And lastly, Grindstone Ministries. I'm happy to announce we have completed the relief phase in Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Grindstone's assets and personnel arrived back on site in eastern Oklahoma yesterday afternoon. And after doing recon down there and wrapping up the last of the commitments that we made to individuals in Rolling Fork, we've come home. Rolling Fork has moved into the recovery phase. There's 2 distinct phases with a disaster. The first is relief, which is handling the immediate problems: food, water, shelter, medical, distribution of goods, relocation of displaced persons, establishing security and controlled access of the area in question where the disaster happened. That's all relief phase. And then there's recovery phase. Recovery phase is rebuilding. And Grindstone does disaster relief. And now that the op tempo has changed from relief to recovery in Rolling Fork, our mission there is done. So thank you to everybody who supported us while we were in Rolling Fork, while we had stuff going on there. Again, couldn't do this without you. If you would like to be a part of the next one, whenever that is, whenever the Father decides to smack another town with a tornado, go to grindstoneministries.com, sign up for the email news blast. You can also support ongoing support for Grindstone and Caleb House by clicking the donate tab at grindstoneministries.com. Caleb House is our restoration facility for juvenile human trafficking survivors. $50 words, which means it's a place that we're building where kids who have been serially raped by assholes can go to have their lives put back together again. We have 24 kiddos in our care right now, ranging in age from 1 year old to 19 years old. It costs us approximately $30,000 per month to meet their every need. And this is food, water, shelter, but also in many cases, there's ongoing legal battles. In many cases, in all cases, there's ongoing trauma that requires, certified therapists and psychologists and medical professionals to tend to these children. All that adds up. Security, all that adds up. And it costs about $30,000 per month right now just to tend to the people that we already have, while also simultaneously raising $1.5 million to build the Caleb House facility, because that's what it's going to take. And every day that goes by that I don't have it built, I feel more and more like shit, because I watch more and more the prices of everything going up. But I am deeply committed to letting our yes be yes. We said we were going to do this, we're going to do this. So I appreciate every one of you that supports Caleb House. Again, there's a way to donate at grindstoneministries.com. You can buy the Caleb House long sleeves t-shirts and hoodies, link in the description. Yes, they're expensive, but so is anti-human trafficking. You can also check out the t-shirts from our brother Rex and our brother Saw, a portion of the proceeds of which go to help build Caleb House. Sanctified Supply Co., our brothers and sisters at Sanctified Supply Co., they make this hat. They made this shirt. This is a refuge shirt. They make our shirts for us. They make swag, and they're really damn good at it. They tithe to Grindstone as well. So consider supporting them. Thank you to every one of y'all. I can't do this without you. And I just want you to know how deeply appreciative I am of you. You right now, you hearing this, you individually. Thank you for supporting our American-made small businesses. Thank you for being a part of this channel. Thank you for supporting Grindstone and Caleb House. A lot of y'all try to put me up on a pedestal. Bear for president. Bear, you're the man. Bear, thank God there's a real man like you out there. No, it's not me, homie. It's the Father. I'm a pipe. He's the water. And if I'm a pipe, if this busted up piece of shit is capable of doing righteousness to the best of my ability to put a smile on the Father's face, what is the implication for you? So if the Father has convicted you to do something that's meaningful and impactful, go do it. If he be for us, who can be against us? No one. Or if they are, take comfort in the fact that he will utterly destroy them while protecting you so that you can accomplish his goals, his mission, so you can be his hands and feet. So don't put me on a pedestal. I'll tell you what I've told everybody that I met in Rolling Fork. You can say thanks to my boss. He lives upstairs. I hope you all have a blessed day. Shalom.